Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session on how leaders can prove ROI, candid conversation about buying security solutions. My name is Amanda Mates. I'm from Sprocket's marketing team, and today I'll be moderating the conversation between two incredible leaders that we have on who have been on both sides of the tables, evaluating, welcome to today's session on how leaders can prove ROI. Sorry about that. Pitching and buying security solutions. First, from the Sprocket side, we have Gaurav. You want to give yourself an intro?
Yeah, well, hey, thanks everybody for joining, and thanks for having us. My name is Gaurav Kulkarni. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Sprocket Security. Excited to talk to you a little bit today. A little bit about me. Last 17 years in cybersecurity, and so I've been a seller and buyer of cybersecurity solutions, and this is a topic kind of near and dear to my heart, and excited to chat a little bit about it.
And we also have Mike Miller on, if you would like to give yourself an intro too.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Miller from Appalachia Technologies. I've been in IT since back when we had to dial into the internet, if anyone remembers those days. So it's been a while. Had a normal transition through the field, started in desktop support, worked in, help desk, systems admin, network admin, got into defensive security, offensive security, founded a firm. I was acquired about 4 years ago by Appalachia. And now I serve as a vCISO and also business development with them. So thank you for having me. I really, truly appreciate it.
Awesome, awesome. So let's set the stage for today's conversation. The security technology landscape is crowded, budgets are tight, and every vendor claims they're the must-have solution. So the big question that we have is how do leaders cut through that noise and justify the investments they're making? Gora, we'll start with you for this one. What is your perspective as a COO of what's the first thing you think of when evaluating a new security tool or service?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking it. So, really, for my role as a chief operating officer here at Sprocket, the number one thing I think about, especially when it comes to security solutions, is security should be an enabler to the business. So, what we look for and what I look for is it going to help us go faster and be more efficient. And I know that sometimes that can be a different frame of mind, but in this day and age, right, security is almost just a mandatory requirement that everybody has to go through. And there are lots of solutions out there, right? And so that's part of why we're talking about it. So anytime a new solution gets presented to me, that's the number one thing I take a look at is, okay, how can it help us as a business to not only make sure that we are continuing to be secure and doing the right thing from a business perspective, but can it make us more efficient? And we'll talk a little bit about that, of what that efficiency really looks like, and what that means. But that's the number one thing when I see a new tool, service, or item that comes up in my mind that I start with. Um, Mike, your thoughts?
No, that's a good answer. So I normally look at it in a problem solution result aspect. I mean, let's face it, it's exciting to get the new shiny tools, especially, now with everything changing and all of the technology. But at the end of the day, we have to kind of step back from the tool for a second and we have to look at it from a 30,000 foot view. What problem are we having, right? Why are we even looking at the tool? What problem are we solving with that? Then once we figure out that problem, what is the correct solution for that? So it's going through that process of finding which companies have those tools to actually solve those problems and have the right solution. And then at the end, what's the result? Is it just is it solving a technical problem? Is it enabling the business from a sales perspective to give them maybe a little more of a competitive edge? Is it to reduce manpower and labor and maybe automate more things? So it's looking at all of those things as a problem solution result kind of methodology. That's typically how I would go into that.
Awesome. So let's dive into the meat of the conversation. Let's talk about ROI, the heart of this discussion. Mike, we'll start with you on this one. How should security leaders think about ROI beyond risk reduction?
Absolutely. So, it's tying every dollar to uptime, right? Uptime's important, especially if you're in a service business or you have data, whatever it is that your business does, you have to make sure that your clients, your customers are able to use that service. So uptime availability is extremely important. Compliance, as I said before in some of our conversations, compliance is it's a necessity, right? But it's also an enabler as well. It's a driver for cybersecurity. For if it weren't for compliance, things would not be moving in our industry, right? So it's finding the compliance reasons for that as well. And then at the end, if you put those two things into place, it's building customer trust. At the end of the day, you're not going to have a company if you don't have that customer trust. So it's looking at all of those things and how can it make that customer trust stronger as well.
Yeah, you touched on a couple things there, I think, Mike, right? So one of the things that I look at from a business perspective is, a lot of times compliance is a driver of a mandatory spend
Yeah.
item, right? So, and this term ROI gets bounced around a lot, right? And the return on investment sometimes with security solutions can be difficult to justify, and many of them use that compliance guideline to say, hey, I have to do this. But then you're in this constant battle of, well, what's better, A or B, if it just checks the box?
Yes.
And so the check the box solution can sometimes be challenging because you're constantly just going to probably just the cheapest alternative
Yeah,
option, and
you're
that
right.
doesn't necessarily look at the return. So I kind of go a little bit to what you touched on earlier, which is what are the top business priorities also when we're looking at the solution.
Yeah.
If I look at us as a business, right, at Sprocket Security, security is our business. So we also not only are securing and helping customers do their security programs, we as a business value security highly because we
Yeah.
are a security company. Comparatively, I think sometimes people forget if you're, making widgets or cars or other things, right? Security is just a thing that you have to do on top of what your core business priorities and top items might be. So a lot of it when I think about ROI is just kind of tying together what are your key business priorities, and then how do your security goals tie to that? And I think you've been a CISO before, Mike, right? Chat a little bit if you can about just how does that tie in when you're kind of managing that from a security practitioner perspective to what the business also needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a balance, right? You have to, one, like you said, you can't operate if your business isn't, if your business isn't secure, you can't operate. But it also has to be balanced because we can't just spend all of our money on security tools. And then at the end of the day, the business it's not aligning with the business. So we have to also make sure that the tools and the things that we are investing in align with the overall picture of the business. And I'll go back to, you mentioned about the compliance piece again, which is extremely important. But at the end of the day, like you said, we don't just want to be checking boxes. It's a huge enabler for us as well. And like I know us, we're SOC 2 Type 2, and to go through the process to go through that is extremely, extremely tough and rigorous. So when we're looking for software, we have to make sure when we're looking for a solution, we have to make sure, where's this data being held? Is it off in China somewhere? Is it somewhere unsafe? Because, at the end of the day, as an organization, we are only as strong as our weakest vendor that we're using. So that's how we have to look at that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, kind of goes to hand in hand to just justifying budgets when you talk about the conversation of ROI, right? So as an operator, obviously there's a limited amount of spend. We'd love to have
Yeah.
spend on everything and all things, but you have to kind of consider it. We also are SOC 2 Type 2
Yeah.
certified.
Yeah.
And so it's a required thing that we have to do. So obviously year over year, I can allocate budget towards security solutions that help us meet that criteria. But you touched on something there, which is that, hey, well, like how else does it help us and help other businesses, right? So for us, when we look at the SOC 2, it is actually almost like a justification to our buyers to say, hey, the company itself is
Absolutely. Yeah.
practicing security. So
Yeah.
having something like that, when having the proper security solutions, helps us from maybe an unquantifiable piece, which is just kind of brand awareness or just marketability and maybe potential future customer acquisitions. And sometimes I think it's hard to justify or just measure, I should say, on
Yeah.
what the intangibles are. I don't know how you've done that. Have you had a chance to talk through that of just like, hey, here's something that we should implement because we have to, but also there's an additional benefit to the business that might enable us further.
Well, yeah. So, when you're looking at any solution, you would hope that it has all of those pieces, right? So I know us, like you said, it gives you that competitive edge with us. There have been times when we have won a contract because we've had that SOC 2 piece, because when we are investing in our software products that we are buying, we're actually doing our due diligence making sure that they align with our overall goal, make sure they align with us also being aligned with our SOC 2. So it gives us that little bit of an edge as well. So if you can kind of, like you say, kill two birds with one stone, make sure that it meets your requirements. But hey, guess what? Here come the bonuses with this as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this especially in this climate, especially when it comes to security solutions, like justifying ROI to a CFO can be difficult because
Yeah.
they're trying to make sure that you're as optimal as possible, right? Sometimes I think about that when we look at just kind of the tool sets that are in security. So I come from most of my background has been in defensive side of security, right? So detection, response, logging, et cetera, right? And at Sprocket, all we do is really offensive security, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we hear that, hey, the spend on those solutions can be a little bit weighted, right? There are a lot of controls in place that are more defensive controls that you have that you have to do, whether it be for cyber liability insurance, whether it be for compliance reasons, or some type of attestation. And so sometimes when we're talking to just buyers of our solution, also we have to have a little bit more justification for offensive security versus defensive security solutions.
Yes.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you've encountered some similar things.
Yeah, we have. I mean, for us, it's definitely easier to sell defensive solutions. I think that's where, that's where a lot of the money is spent on the defensive side. I would say probably 60% is spent on defense, right? 25% is probably spent on offense. The other percentage is probably spent on compliance, GRC. So yeah, you're exactly right. And many times, coming from the pen test world, 'cause that's much of my background, coming from that world, they're coming, clients sometimes come to you and they just want to check the box. So yeah, you're exactly right. And that makes it tough sometimes as well. So having a case having a case where you can solve more than just that offensive piece, and you can hit some of those other things and go into some of those other spend categories, that helps a lot too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to touch on it a bit for some of the folks that we work with, the return sometimes from a buyer perspective for offensive security solutions seems to be that they need to satisfy to their external customer that they're being
Yes.
more proactive.
Yep.
So it's not necessarily even just I'm doing the bare minimum, right? But you're also showing to your buyer, whether it be a buyer of widgets or cars or what have you that's out there, that you're being a lot more proactive and making a focus on your security programs. And I think actually the end customers of your customers are actually asking for that, right?
Yes, they are. It's so funny that you said that, because if I had to measure, I would say with us, you know, probably 60% of our pen tests come from not necessarily compliance, but they're going through an acquisition, or they're onboarding a new partner, and that partner or the company acquiring wants to see that as well. So yeah, that's a huge driver.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and when I get asked a little bit about like what's the balance, right? I think you said what was it, 60% more towards
Yeah, about
defensive side.
60, 25, 15 is what that's my opinion of where most of how that's going to get spent. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it depends on the
Uh,
organization too.
Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, I think I think some organizations, right? I know we do too. We kind of think about it as frameworks. So there's all kinds of security frameworks that have gone out there that we've utilized, right? There's MITRE, which is a great one. There's some other things that have come and gone that's out there. A lot of the ways that, at least I think about it for our business as we've gone through is, okay, do we have the foundational pieces embedded first, right? I mean, just basics,
Yeah.
right? Do you have, proper firewalling, tooling, EDR technologies to get your user secure, and then kind of jump up through the stack accordingly. I mean, do you think boards understand that, or do you think that that's too
No,
complex? Yeah,
I think it's learning to talk to boards at a high level. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to the board to talk about, hey, our technology is antiquated, we're on SSL, and we need to roll over to TLS, that means nothing to the board. You're going to put them to sleep.
yeah,
But if you're able to talk to them and say, well, if we don't fix this, we might not be able to sell widgets by next Thursday because we're going to be out of compliance. Now you're talking their language. So and sometimes in our position, we have to be that go in between the super technical people and the stakeholders or the board members, because many times the technical team sometimes might not know how to communicate that. So it's kind of being in between and being the conduit, basically.
Yeah.
That's a great loop in. We've gotten our first question in from the audience of what's the hardest part of explaining value to non-technical leaders and how are you overcoming that?
Yeah.
So that's a great point of having that middle person to almost interpret for each other.
Yeah, and I think it's something we're all trying. I'm still trying to work on it, right? Because I'm a geek at heart, and I'm not as hands-on, obviously, as I used to be. Because I'm more on the business side now. But for technical people, I think the hardest part is not speaking tech, and being able to really, before you go into that meeting, really prepare and really think about how can I communicate this technical problem to a non-technical person or non-technical team so that they can take the information I'm giving them, because at the end of the day, they're the ones writing checks. So we have to make sure that we communicate things to them in a way that they can make a very good educated decision off of the information that we are giving them. So again, if we go in talking about encryption and databases and stuff, we can't do that. We have to be able to talk dollars, cents, business continuity, customer trust, things like that.
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? Because, I similarly, I come from a very technical background as a practitioner, implementer, and then kind of moved more into more of a business type of role that's in there. And so I'll answer it in twofold, one from a selling perspective and also from a buying perspective, right? So from a selling perspective, we actually constantly have those conversations where, maybe you're talking to a much more technical end user, but that individual then has to take it up the chain to justify the investment for a purchase, right? And so it's less about talking about bits and bytes, right? And talking more about the outcomes that the solution is actually going to achieve for them. And some of that is from understanding, well, what is the end business outcome that they care about? Do they care about things like consolidation and efficiency, or do they care about making sure that they have some sort of like future spend return that they see out of there? And just articulating the problem and the solution kind of in that same sense.
Yep.
I'll tell you from a buyer perspective, the unique position that I'm in, right? My team's coming to me all the time with new tools and services and
New
things that
shiny things.
right? New shiny things, right? And so I also have a similar question. And so the perspective, it's like, hey, here's a new gadget that you got to go through and get. It's the new hot thing. And like I can tell that when the individuals have come to me, they've done their homework and research, right? They really are looking at it. But the question I ask them is like, okay, two things, right? One, is it gonna just make you more efficient? And if so, tell me how. Sometimes can't answer that question, so I make them go back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is it going to make
Absolutely.
your department or is it going to replace something, right? Like if I look at just kind of like the overarching tool stack,
What can we get rid of?
what can
Yeah.
we get rid of, right?
Yeah.
And the answer could be no, but then if the answer is no, well, why invest in it, right? Where is it going to make us better?
Well, yeah, because you also want to make sure that you're not overlapping. How many times do you have tools in place that aren't being used? They were set up, no one logs into the dashboard, but we have this new shiny tool, but we've had it now for 2 or 3 years. But maybe we bought the tool, but we don't have the team or the resources to actually make the tool do the things that it's supposed to do. So are we
Yeah.
buying another tool and kind of setting ourselves up for failure because we're not even using that first tool?
Yeah, I think articulating the tools in that technical lens sometimes gets really difficult because typically the end signer is not in that wheelhouse, right? So
Yeah.
you've got to take it
Yeah.
up a level, or at least expand it a level.
Absolutely.
Great question.
Yeah, so that brings us to evaluating those new vendors and solutions and technologies. As you just mentioned, they bring it to you, and if you are, okay, I'll open my ears, I'll listen to what you have to say to propose this. What are those immediate things that you're like, yeah, this is probably going to help our team out from the vendor side, not only from internal resources? And what are those red flags you're looking for where you're not touching a solution? Cora, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So I'll start from a buyer perspective, right? So some vendor red flags or just tool red flags are typically um, just a bombardment of shiny new thing at me. Name your buzzword that's coming out there, and it's everything sometimes from LinkedIn to email to the worst case offense, which I would never do, is, like people are sending calendar invites directly on my calendar for a topic. So it floods my calendar to make sure that I get visibility on it. But I'm like, what is this? What is this thing? Right? That's probably a vendor I just probably will never do business with, because that's just an overwhelming flood of information that, even if it's a good solution, it's not a great approach, right? To go through on there. The other thing I like from a buyer perspective that I look at, that are probably a red flag, is it just too good to be true, right? Like sometimes the positioning that comes out is the silver bullet of what they can fix all of my problems. And then the truth is, like, nothing can fix all of your problems, right? This
Yeah.
was kind of, I think, probably the AI hype that's still going a little bit. But if you look back a year ago, it was AI everything, and we're going to replace everything, and AI is going to change the world. Well, there's lots of
It's going to make
uses.
your home life better.
Everything. Buy it now. Give me your money. Just buy it now,
Yep.
right? That's
Yep.
that's typically another red flag for me there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. You're right. Worst offense, calendar invite. I have that all the time. You just have to ignore it. The other one for me is, don't come to me with your product and what it is. Come to me with, the problem that you see my organization having. Right? Understand, maybe do a little research on the organization, and from a sales side, right? Because I'm on the sales side as well, sometimes. And from the sales side, if I'm going to approach an organization and try to sell them something, I'm going to do all my homework. I'm going to look at the decision makers. I'm going to learn about that company as much as I can. Is it public? Is it private? Then I'm going to kind of, if it's public, I'm going to, dig into as many reports as I can, look at the financial statements, look at everything I can to learn as much as I can about their environment, about the pain points, where they're trying to go with their growth, how quickly they're growing, things like that. And that way, when I start communicating with them, I understand, at least, obviously you can't understand everything from an outside view unless you're inside a company, but as much recon as you can do. So if I have someone coming to me, trying to pitch me something, I would hope that some of that homework is already done, instead of, like you said, hey, this is going to fix all of your problems.
Hey, and I mean, spot on, right? And being both a seller and buyer of solutions, I'll tell you that is exactly the stuff that gets through to me.
Yeah.
I'm constantly bombarded in a crowded market of solutions that might be out there, but the more targeted they can make it
Yep.
towards what they even perceive my problems might be, it gets
Yes.
through the noise, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, being reflective is, sometimes there's a lot of outreach, whether it be sales outreach or marketing outreach. That's, hey, I went to the similar school that you were in, or hey, I have a connection that of a location that you worked in, right? That works for a little bit, but the ones that really hit the mark is, hey, I understand that you're probably in a growing business state. Here's potentially some issues that you're seeing from a scalability perspective. Here's
Yeah.
potentially some security problems that you've seen, right? They're guessing, obviously, because they don't actually
Oh
know
yeah.
our problems, but it's
Yeah.
much more targeted, right? That gets a lot of attention. And then it's a very quickly of, here's how we think we can solve that problem.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot about, and I talk about this in our company a ton, is touch points, right? Obviously, you want to take someone on a date before you try to marry them. So, if from a sales side, even if it's on LinkedIn, engage with them. Engage with their posts, comment, provide some insight, right? Give them some positive signals for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And then after there's a little bit of a relationship back and forth, okay, then DM them, because now it's not going to be just like a cold call, right? Now when I get that call, oh, you know what? Oh, that triggers in my memory because you and I have gone back and forth 3, 4, 5 times now. And I call touch points. There's a, not the sidetrack. There's a book called Marketing Made Simple. It's fantastic. Talks about this touch points, and it makes such a big difference rather than just sending us cold DMs.
Absolutely.
Yes. And as you both have mentioned just in conversation, this buying journey is not a solo act. So, Mike, we'll start with you and your experience of who's typically involved in actually making these decisions, and this doesn't get stuck in a friction, bundle of it's not getting through.
Absolutely, it's a team sport, right? Everybody should be involved. Security team, IT, finance, legal, compliance, maybe even marketing. How can they leverage this tool as well, or leverage what we are getting out of this tool to kind of give us a couple positive things to bring to market. It can't just be one team, going into it and trying to make the decision. And then all of a sudden you're 3/4 of the way through and you're ready to sign. And then compliance comes back at you and says, you know what, this violates our SOC 2. It's a no-go. So now look at all the time you've had on the calls and the demos and, internal meetings and so on. But if we would have brought the compliance team in first, or when this all started, think of the energy that we would have saved,
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, especially when it comes to security solutions, right? I go back to kind of my kind of core thesis is that security should be an enabler of the business. So
Yeah.
from a buying perspective, when we're looking at new security solutions, we have a committee. We'll take a look at, the types of solutions that we want to look for based on either projected spend or projected areas of visions of where we want to go through. But that committee actually is cross-functional. It's not just the security folks that are out there. It's also folks from product. It's also folks from marketing. It's also folks from other departments that may be impacted by it. So from a stakeholder perspective, depending on the type of solution and who or what is going to touch that solution from a department perspective, those are typically the ones that should be brought in. Many times they're not, like you mentioned, to the end there. And I think some of that from a selling perspective gets forgotten, right? You talk about like single threaded selling, right? And it's never actually just one individual that you're selling to. Rarely, I should say, is it one individual that you're selling to, right? There's typically somebody that's part of the evaluation. There's typically somebody that's actually budget and signing authority. There's typically somebody that has a vote, but maybe is not the true decision maker.
Absolutely.
And especially in a competitive environment, just trying to balance some of that.
I agree. I think another trick too is minimizing the options, right? It's like if I take my wife to the car lot and there's 15 different colors of cars, but they're all the same. We're probably not going to buy a car that day because there's just too many decisions there's just too many choices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to narrow those cars down, maybe blue, black, and red, take her to the lot. Now there's 3 choices. And now she can make that decision. And I think it's the same thing here, where if we're bringing all these teams in internally and we're looking at 10 different tool sets, we need to do our due diligence before we bring that entire team together, do our homework, and find what we think are your best 2 or 3 options. Any more than that, it's just not going to go anywhere. You have to have things pretty well minimized before you bring everybody together.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to, when you have 15 people in a meeting and you have 10 solutions, nothing's getting done.
There's really no solution at that point, right?
Absolutely.
There's too many options in there.
Yep.
I think from a decision-making perspective, so if I look at the tools that we purchase, right? Also, I am a signing authority for Sprocket, but I will defer to my team, even if I like a solution in there. Why? Because they're ultimately the end users and implementers of said solution. So even if I see a high level of business value on it, I'm going to make sure they have a heavy vote in that, because ultimately they're the users that have to make it successful.
Absolutely.
And what are those things that you're actually listening to hear from a vendor, not necessarily as the signer, but as someone who's going to bring it to the team, so we're not wasting energy and time going through a pitch process that actually doesn't fit? What are those things that you're listening for, green flags, if you will, or building trust?
You want to take that first, Mike?
I saw you in deep thought. Well, I think it goes back to the problem solution result, right?
Yeah.
Which vendors are solving the problem that we have? Which solution seems to fit our organization the best with the least overlap, can provide as much efficiency as it can at the lowest cost as it can, and then lead us to the result, which is all of those other things, right? Compliance, sales enablement, being able to protect our data, and so on. I think it's just from a high level. I think it's those things, and being transparent about pricing. Don't play the game of we're going to go through all of this and then you're going to come. No, tell me what it is right now, so that I don't have to waste time. Be transparent about that, and then even long term, this is the price this year, but obviously if it takes tons of money and tons of resources to put a solution in place, I need something that says you're not going to raise the price 15% next year. There's got to be, we have to kind of look out as far as we can too.
So I'm glad so my head went to really transparency because you asked the question of how do you build trust in a sales cycle, especially from a vendor perspective. So as I'm looking at evaluations and purchasing, not only do I want to understand how does the solution work, but how does it fit in my organization? So there's really a couple of, if you think about any type of buying journey, at least a couple of touch points where you're trying to assess and make sure, especially for a new tool or service, does it meet my requirements? But there's step two and step three of does it really meet my requirements? So
Yeah.
like making sure that whoever is on the selling side is listening and adapting and making sure they're curating the answers appropriately versus just, yep, it'll work, yep, it'll work. That's
Yeah.
usually flagging there.
Yeah, it
And
is.
then
Yeah.
the transparency you spot on, right? I mean, I'm pretty transparent with vendors for purchasing solution of here's what I'm looking for, here's what budgetary things look like. And then really out years, right? So as we scale as a business and as a solution, right, what is my spend actually going to be, right? So as
Yeah.
transparent as they can be around pricing, to know here's the levers A, B, and C that you're going to have to spend, and here's what it looks like for out years that's out there.
Yeah. Something you said, oh, it'll work. We can do that. That scares me, right? I have so much respect if someone says, you know what, that's a great thought. That's a great question. Let me go ask our team and get back to you on that rather than just, oh yeah, yeah, we can do that. Because that's car salesman, at its finest right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's shift the conversation a little bit. Let's assume that a vendor has passed all of our questions, we've signed them on, and now it's post-purchase. Mike, we'll start with you. How do you assess whether solution was the right choice once you're using it? You're going to keep them on. I'm kind of looking at how do you evaluate your stack every year of the things you do currently have?
Yeah,
And when is
absolutely.
it time to move on?
Yeah, so after you bring this new solution on and you've signed with the vendor and you get him to give it some time, that original problem that you had before you ever started looking for a vendor, does that problem still exist? Or maybe it still exists, but it's not as much of a problem as it was before. Maybe we've solved 70% of that problem. Um, how's the vendor support, right? After things always change after you sign the papers, right? Because now you're no longer talking to the sales team, now you're talking to the customer support team and so on, and they're a little bit different, right? So is the support quality what was promised? How about integration? Has the integration support been there? Has your team been able to, and this isn't even always on the vendor at the same time, it's your team. Has your team been able to do what was asked of them to get this solution implemented? Or is it going to become another out of the box solution that's sitting there, just on idle? So it's measuring adoption and utilization, both, I think.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, I was gonna just double down on those two points, right? When things come up for renewal, it's typically that first question is, did it solve the problem we were
Yeah.
originally going to look at? And then has the problem changed? The space changes, industry changes, technology changes, things change, right? So maybe the problem that we originally purchased a solution for is slightly modified. And then, then I look at did the team actually use it for what was there? And
Yeah.
that's not always on the solution provider, right? Maybe we weren't able to actually maximize usage of said tool or said solution for various factors of reasons. And again, right, if that's the case, then it's sort of we thought this was the right thing to do, but we never actually got to a point where we could get to a good state to utilize it.
Yeah.
Maybe
And maybe
not.
the
Maybe not
business
enough.
itself made a change. Maybe the business was when you had that problem, the business was going this way. And after you started implementing that solution or a year into it, the business made a total change on their strategy. So maybe their strategy doesn't require this particular tool anymore. And that's where, if you're a technical person, I tell everybody, you don't just be a technical person. Learn the business that you're working for. Learn what's important to them. Learn what their mission is. Learn, where they're going, and make sure that your solutions are still aligned with that. Often it's just kind of like a balance check every once in a while.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the other thing I'll mention that I look for, especially when it comes to renewals, is the solution providing something new that it
Yeah.
hasn't, right? Most vendors are innovating as the space is changing, so I'll take a look at it from a holistic picture perspective. We're doing this now as we do every year around just our entire tool stack. Can something be replaced? Do we like a
Yep.
vendor that has added a capability that maybe we save spend elsewhere on? Maybe as they've gone through. And then, I think you asked us like, when's the time to move on? And I actually lean quite a bit on my team for that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that user feedback
When they roll
is
their eyes,
crucial.
when
Yep.
you ask them a question, they're just rolling their eyes.
Like,
Like that's a sign.
you're asking me about that thing that you got again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That could be anything, right? Lack of confidence in the data that the tool or solution's providing, like the customer support aspect that's out there, right? So a lot of times I don't have to dive into the actual solution. I kind of lean on my team members to say, hey, what do you think, right?
Yeah.
And you typically have a clear answer right away, right?
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So now let's pretend we have a crystal ball. Let's look into the future of security procurement and how it's evolving over the next 5, 10 years. How will AI change how people evaluate vendors? Are we headed towards more consolidated solutions, or will best of the breed still win? Goro, we can start with you on
Yeah.
that.
Thanks for that. So look, I think there's lots of good uses of AI. So from a security solution perspective, I actually believe that AI is going to be used heavily to actually do the brunt of the research and evaluation of these
Yeah. Yeah.
solutions. It has become kind of a source to cut through a lot of the noise that we've been talking about to figure out who should we look at, what are the comparisons, and get it down to probably the top 1 to 2. All right, that's out there. And a lot of the usage of AI to procure solutions has been, I think, on that where you cut through a lot of the noise to present a couple of options. It's starting to do a pretty good job of just not only pros and cons from a feature perspective, but also what are the various customer feedbacks that you see from that solution? Who's talking about it positively and who's not? So you can do a lot of that research so you can make a little bit more of an informed decision that might be out there. The other thing you talked about consolidation versus pointed solutions. It's a mixed bag, right? It just depends on what your priorities are. Again, especially when it comes to procuring security solutions, I would venture that security is a mandatory thing that's out there. So it's not something you should try to cheap out on. If you do, you're gonna like reap the consequences of that at some point that's out there. So you should absolutely be looking at best of breed of what's gonna help me. That said, the tools that are coming up that are best of breed maybe have a component that they've brought on board that was a previous solution that you had paid for that you no longer read, right? So I think AI can help actually just like identifying things to go look at, but also just narrowing down what are the top 2 or 3 that you should go look at and comparing not only features, cost, perspective, customer feedback for you. So then you can make a much more logical, I'd say, informed decision around getting the best of breed solution that maybe also helps you from a budgeting perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I think that AI is going to allow us to be more educated, right? Before we had to kind of shake a hand, sign a paper, and just hope and have as much trust as we could. But now we're able to not just trust, but verify. And the verification process over the years has been a process, right? It's been a lot. Well, AI allows us to do that much faster. So I think it's going to make things more efficient. I think decisions are going to be able to be made faster than they have previously because now we have all of this data right here in front of us. So we can identify which how strong vendors are, how weak vendors are, all kinds of things. But yeah, I think AI is going to be huge for that, and I think it it's going to make the selection process much easier, even narrowing down. Before I said maybe there's 10 different choices. Using AI to really even narrowing that down prior was a big job. Well, now using AI to narrow that down to 2 or 3. Okay, but now we need to get our hands dirty and dig in a little deeper. So I think it's definitely going to be a very useful tool.
I think I'll add one area in AI that I haven't seen a solution come out with yet, right? But especially when it comes to procuring and buying, that is a great category to go look at is take AI and use it for the next step, which is really how does solution A work in my environment? So take it a step further
Yeah.
and talk through like how would this actually fit in my environment, not only from a technology perspective, but also just time to implement, usage and workflows with additional tools. Does it work with my existing
Agreed.
tool stack? What are the gaps of the existing tool stack when I try to go through and integrate it? So it actually gives me a post-implementation plan that's a lot more concrete.
Yes.
That would then allow me to assess, hey, what's the actual total cost of implementing a new solution, right?
Yep.
What's the impact that it's going to have across my entire tool stack? Not just purchasing this and comparing A to B, but once I put in the rest of my ecosystem, how does it going to work?
Yep. And if you do the work, you're right. You're exactly right. And if you do that work early, it's going to be a lot of work up front to train, AI on your environment. But the more work that you do up front on training it on your environment, the easier it's going to be later for AI to determine things like you said. How is this going to fit in my environment? Can you make me a plan to implement this? Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
And hopefully also assess the risk, right? As we talk about ROI,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I think
yeah,
the biggest like detriment to ROI as you get, as we talked about, is getting a solution in place that either it doesn't get used, sits on a shelf, or creates more havoc and more work
yeah, yeah.
than you originally implemented to. So
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, we're just at time now.
That
This
went
was an
fast.
incredible conversation. Yeah, lots of great information. Thank you both. If either of you have final thoughts, you can each have the floor for one more minute. Gaurav,
um,
do you want
you
to start with you?
Yeah, do you want me to go? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so look, I think this is a great topic that we go through, right? And I thank everybody for joining. A couple things from security solution perspective. I think the advent and types of security solutions is just going to continue to grow. So there's still going to be more and more that are going to come out there. But I would encourage sellers, speaking to you, to think a little bit more about how do you cut through the noise to make sure that that solution is actually a fit to the customer's environment.
Yeah,
And that fit, as we've talked about, encompasses many things. It encompasses not just a key requirement they meet, but also how can the solution that you're actually pitching and selling help make the customer's environment better, whatever that looks like, right? And it's very tailor made towards what that solution might be.
yeah. I agree. At the end of the day, cybersecurity is a very technical business, right? But at the end, it's a people business. And so for me, it's also about creating those relationships and forming those relationships and shaking hands with as many people as you can shake hands with, so that when there is a problem that you have and you need a solution, it's so much better when you can have someone in your back pocket that you've built a relationship with, that has knowledge and connections and so on, so that you're not just going off of a cold DM that arrived in your inbox. Again, it's a people business. So I will always go back to that and say, buy not necessarily from logos, but they buy from people that have helped, that have built that trust. So I think for me, that's what it comes down to as well.
Awesome. Thank you both again. I think we've heard the consistent message across that ROI is not just saving a dollar, but truly reducing risk, long-term business resilience. So whether you are a partner choosing a new partner, renewing contracts, a vendor cutting through the noise, we hope you've taken something away from this talk today that is measurable, valuable to you, and connects back to your mission and risk appetite. For everyone that joined us live, thank you for your engagement. We've seen the comments coming in. Thank you for the few questions. If you want to revisit today's talk, we will be sharing the recording out soon on the events channel in our LinkedIn. So make sure you follow Sprocket or Mike Miller's page. We will be sharing those out. And until next time, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Thanks
You're
all.
welcome. Thanks.